Deb Roy has created another talk just for us for LeWeb, and he's coming here. And he's the CEO of Bluefin Labs and also a professor at MIT. So please help me welcome Deb Roy.
Okay.
Welcome, Deb. I think your clicker is coming.
OK, my clicker is coming. Well, I'll start without it. Well, thank you. What I'd like to do today is share with you an idea for how to study human communication in a new way using rich and large data sets. And the idea can be unpacked into 4 elements. Number 1, record everything. Number 2, develop machine learning and data mining algorithms. Thank you. To uncover patterns in the data that's recorded. 3, visualize those patterns so that humans can make sense of what's in the data and make sense in particular of cause-effect relationships. And 4, leverage that understanding to advance areas of science, commerce, and government that intersect with the world of human communication. So what I'd like to do is make these ideas concrete through 2 efforts that I've been involved in. And if we could get the slides, that would be great. So the first effort is in the area of science, and in fact is a personal story, which involves my son. And let's see if we can get our first slide. Press the green button.
It's coming, Deb.
OK. You're going to see a beautiful picture of my son. And what we began with was my wife, who's a professor of speech and hearing sciences, and I made the decision to instrument our home so that we could capture a new kind of home video that would become the basis for studying how my son learned his first words. And one of the surprising things about language acquisition in children, language is arguably the defining feature of the human species. It's how we teach each other. It's how we create and transmit culture. A lot is at stake in understanding how we crack the code of language, but very little is understood because of a lack of data. And the basic data to understand how a child learns is naturally in the home. And so here's what we did. If we can get the next slide. I'll keep describing what you're going to see, which is a shot of my house. And if you come into my house, we're going to move rapidly through lots of slides. We will be in my living room. And if we look up in the ceiling, we see a camera and a little microphone. And when we look down from that camera, we have a fisheye lens view throughout the room. And this is my son when he was about 3 months old, and my wife. This is in the living room. And I wonder if I have a range issue. There we go. Here we are looking now into the baby bedroom, and the kitchen, and the dining room, and throughout the rest of the house. And in the basement of our house was a really big disk drive that had the ability, if we wanted to record continuously. Whoops, let's go back. Sorry, I guess there's just a delay here. So we're now sweeping through a day in our life at home. We're passing through from daylight. You can see sort of the activity patterns of the home. And we go into evening, incandescent light, and finally lights out for the day. So over the course of 3 years, we collected what is by far the world's biggest home video collection, about 250,000 hours of audio and video. And I have taken great precautions, and with my wife and with the various folks at MIT, to put in privacy protections for this data, for how it's stored and who has access to it. And with those protections in place, we began a multi-year effort to start building those machine algorithms to start making sense of the content of this data. So I'm going to give you a quick tour through some of the things we've been doing in my lab at MIT. This is my wife and I in the kitchen. And as we start moving through this video, we're going to analyze the movement patterns and extract both the spatial and the temporal dimensions, in this case of my wife and I, as we prepare breakfast. And this is an everyday bit of activity, and as we move through space and through time, we're leaving behind what we call space-time worms, these little visual indicators of where we've been. You can see me there carrying a couple of plates, and my wife and I are each leaving these patterns. And this became a standard way for us to reduce a large collection of video down to, in a sense, its essence, which were the human pattern activities. And from that, we developed a software interface that we're looking at here called Total Recall. This is, and I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my clicker. So there we are back. Whoops, let's go forward one step. And we're looking now at 2 minutes of video across 3 rooms in the house. And we can go to a different view of the same data and look at a day. Or we can go one more step and look at 3 months of data. And so using this tool, we were able to mark where my son was throughout the house and then transcribe the speech that he heard, and ultimately, as he started to talk, the words that he produced. So what I'm going to do now is take us for our first little tour into this data. And what you're going to hear is the equivalent of a time-lapse of a video. If you've ever seen a time-lapse video of a flower blossoming, where you speed up through time and can see the form of a flower emerge, we're going to do the same thing, but instead of a flower, we're going to hear a speech sound. And I hope we have the audio connected and nice and loud, so that we can hear my son go from saying gaga at about his first birthday. We're going to, in 40 seconds, pass through about half a year of development. And what you will hear is sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, as my son transitions from saying gaga to saying water. Pretty cool. So what this represents for me is just a very simple demonstration of the power of big data and the ability to index and pull out of it trajectories through time. And it wasn't just the word water that my son learned how to speak. This is actually a map of some of the over 500 words that my son learned by the time he hit his 2nd birthday. And for the first time in history, we know exactly where every word was born, in time and in space. And so we were equipped now to do a new kind of study of where words come from. So as a baseline, we went and looked at the relationship between how often a word was heard and when my son first produced it. And this is a correlation, 0.05. The bigger the correlation, the stronger the predictive model. 0.05 is a weak correlation, but it's definitely there. So indeed, when my son hears a word, many times he's more likely to speak it early. So there's a relationship, naturally, between what he hears and what he learns. But what about the social context, the activity context? And this was really what this research was developed to ask a new question. The kind of activities within which my son heard those words, of course, also affect how he learns. And we can now compare visual context and its effects with language. So let me show you another analysis we developed. This is myself and my son in our living room. And as we move through this video, if you look carefully, you'll see some green and red ink that we are leaving behind as we move through the space. We're on the floor playing. My son is leaving red ink. I'm leaving green. We then go to the couch. We're looking at cars through the window. And then my son is playing in a little walking toy. 30 minutes go by, and we stop time. And now we represent time as the vertical axis. And what we are able to reveal are social activity structures in space and time. These little knots of colored red and green we call social hotspots. That little red spiral is a solo hotspot. We do this now for a couple of years of data, and now we can ask what is the relationship between the words heard and the activity context in which they're heard. So here's another video clip of my son and our nanny being tracked. Our nanny is going to offer him some water. And you didn't hear the audio, but there was a moment in time there where my son heard the word water. And now we're going to find every time he ever heard the word water and capture the traces of movement at exactly those moments in time. And we're going to fast forward through 2 years of experience of hearing the word water in various contexts and capture the overall gestalt activity surrounding the experience of hearing water. And what's revealed in the wake of all this data is a kind of landscape. We call these wordscapes. This is the wordscape for the word water. Lots of activity over to the left in the kitchen. That peak in the background is a reading chair where a lot of water was consumed. If we now swing over to the entrance of the house where a lot of departures and arrivals happen, and we look at the word bye, as in goodbye, we see a completely different wordscape. A lot of activity, naturally, at the entrance of the house. And so now we can come back to our predictive model. Remember that 0.05? That was how well we could predict based on frequency of words. Now we have a new hypothesis, that the uniqueness of the wordscape is a predictor of how early a word will be learned. If a wordscape is more unique compared to all other wordscapes, we predict the word will come earlier. And here is a fresh result. This is Matt Miller's thesis work from this summer, where we have demonstrated what we believe is the most predictive model of child language acquisition ever demonstrated. And surprisingly, the visual context, the activities, provide a far stronger model for why certain words are learned before others, with all sorts of implications if a child is having trouble learning language, of where to actually intervene, to look at the non-linguistic structure of activities as a cue. So that's one of several different lines of research that we're doing in looking at language acquisition. Let me now tell you about a very different direction that grew out of this work. So essentially, what we're doing is studying the interplay between context and language. Michael Fleischman was a PhD student working with me in my lab on that language development work, and he had the insight that the same principles of language analysis could be applied to a very different kind of context that drives lots of language, and that is television. And it turns out, similar to how children learn language, there's a lot about TV and TV viewing that we don't know. I discovered this old saying in the world of advertising as I stepped out of MIT and into the world of media that many advertisers will agree with. Half of my advertising is wasted, I just don't know which half. A lot about the audience of television is not well understood. And now there's this new window opening up because primarily of Twitter and also Facebook and the blogosphere. This is a simple little tweet, someone reporting to whoever will listen to them that they're watching the show Glee on television. Here's another, someone making a comment about a bit of late-night programming. Someone commenting on Romney, one of the Republican presidential candidates, as he debates his opponents on national television. Here's even someone making a critique of a 30-second commercial. And on this kind of data is now exploding through public social media networks. In fact, if you chart the year-over-year growth shown in these green numbers of just the volume of conversation about a TV show, this is all in the US, in the premiere season episode in 2010 versus 2011, we see triple-digit growth in reality TV. We see the same in comedies. We see the same in drama. We really are on this sort of hockey stick kind of growth curve of consumer behavior, people talking about TV. So in the world of television, here is kind of the basics, so I can put this, what's happening into context of how the web is intersecting with television. On one hand, you've got TV content that radiates through traditional television networks, broadcast and cable, and reaches some audience. And in the United States, Nielsen is the official metric for how many impressions, media impressions are made, and advertising is bought and sold on that basis. In the US, $70 billion a year spent on TV ads, which dwarfs all other forms of advertising combined. Online, search, social, etc. And it's holding its own. Now, what's always been true about TV is that people talk about what they watch. They generate social expressions in reaction to media impressions. If you're moved, if you have a moving experience, you talk about it. And until recently, that talk would disappear as fast as it appeared. In the living rooms, in the bars, as people talked, the words disappear. So what's changed is that people are now creating their own networks of influence, and those expressions are flowing through social media networks, Twitter, Facebook, blogosphere, Google+, and beyond. And we now have this perfect storm to actually see at scale what people are saying and do cause-effect analysis between context and language. Same basic idea. So Michael and I took this idea and had the following sort of vision, which is, what if we built a machine that effectively watched all of television, processed every media impression that any person might have, and based on that, predicted how, if someone was going to talk about that piece of television programming or advertising, what they might say. Words, phrases, hashtags, you name it. And in fact, had a machine that could learn over time and track language change. And using that, create a gigantic cause-effect map of television and its audience. So this is the company that grew out of that idea. It's called Bluefin Labs. And what I will do is take you through a quick tour of Bluefin's data and how all that processing comes together. So you're looking here at 50,000 people, a small slice, a very small slice of our data. And the cotton candy sort of network over the people represent all of the publicly known connections between people. So this is a sort of traditional view now of a social network. And then we build a second network, which we call the content network of television. Each node represents either a show or an ad on television. And this network of content also has a very rich set of connections. So all of the obvious connections between content and advertising. If a razor blade ad ran during a certain comedy show, we link them. Every comedy show is linked because they have a shared genre. Every episode of a series has its link. So all of that link structure is captured in the lower graph. So we have the social web, we have the TV web of content, and critically, we have the connective tissue, links between what people are saying and the specific content on TV that they're talking about. So we have a name for this network. We call it the TV genome because it is, to the best of our knowledge, the most comprehensive data set of its kind that links US television to its audience. And I just want to draw out an analogy, since this is LeWeb and we're mainly thinking about the digital world, that the origins of Google, if you consider PageRank, was to analyze inbound links to website content as a means of ranking the importance of a piece of content that could then enable better search results. So if you think about live TV, there is no inbound links, which is why you can't apply that method to TV content. But if you take every comment in response to a piece of television as a kind of link, which indeed it is, you're referring to a piece of content, then the TV genome is capturing the equivalent of inbound links at scale to TV programming. And the implications of having that kind of comprehensive data are very much analogous to what PageRank lets you do for the websites, both on the programming side for search and certainly also for the advertising side. So this data has growing scale. Today in the US, actually more than 20 million people actively talking on public social networks. We're indexing about 200,000 shows per month and about 2 million ads across a number of networks, and adding about 40 million links per month. So this sort of connected set of graphs is getting more and more richly intertwined on a real-time basis. So let me take you for a tour through the data. First view is very straightforward. We have a set of US networks listed along the top, along the vertical, and 3 days along the time horizon. And we can cut this data and look at it as a bar graph, where every bar is counting how many remarks a particular airing of a show drove. So where Nielsen measures how many people watched each show, Bluefin is measuring how many people talked about each show. We're doing this across 215 networks, effectively over 95% of all TV that's being watched in the US. We're doing this 24/7. But beyond knowing how many people watched, which is a simple one-dimensional metric, we can now drill in. So here's one particular show on TV that had a lot of conversation. We go in one step, and we see the raw data, which consists of people's comments, in this case, in response to one of the Republican presidential debates, a couple of 100,000 comments. And we can build a tag cloud out of the audience response and get a real-time read on how people are responding, in this case, to this debate. If we start to process this data, we can get very interesting views. What I'm going to do is preview for you today some visualizations we're designing that we're working together with ABC, one of the major broadcast networks in the US. And actually, this weekend, there will be a GOP debate where Bluefin Analytics will be introduced to the US national audience over ABC. So here's what some of the possibilities are, and sort of making this kind of big data available to television audiences. We take a GOP debate, and this is using Twitter data. We first amass all of the comments that were directly driven, and we get a sense of the audience that you're a part of. In this case, about 500,000 comments over a 2-hour period. And now we can start doing some analyses of who is the audience. We ask them to self-assemble. Women stand on one side, men to the other, and we see a distribution based on gender. Or we go and analyze the content, and we see there were 7 candidates, and the audience self-assembles so we can see how much conversation each candidate drove. And here Perry drives the most. We can bring back all of our social media active audience, 500,000, and look over time at the volume of conversation. Let's do some topic analysis, and we find in yellow a surge in conversation about immigration. So what was so interesting about the comments about immigration? It turns out, in fact, as we build a tag cloud of just that burst, that Romney and Perry had a fight, and that drove a lot of conversation in this particular debate amongst the audience. Final example, sometimes one fleeting comment, in this case from Bachman, revealing that she doesn't understand where Libya is, leads to a retweet storm that infects much of the audience's thinking for the rest of this particular debate. So I'm trying to demonstrate both underlying capabilities once you have this kind of aggregated audience response combined with text mining and semantic analysis, and also what we think is an important next step, which is to make those findings, those patterns, visualized so you can actually create a feedback loop with the people who are watching and reacting, and get a sense of what other people are thinking as they're watching the same thing as you. So let's go back now to take a second pass through the data. Here we are again on the vertical, some networks, and the comments about shows. But now we're going to see this fine red structure. And if you zoom in, each of those little lines is a 30-second commercial. So Bluefin is in real time tracking all ads on TV, all US national ads on TV. If you're Coca-Cola and you've just spent a few $1 million running an ad campaign, some of those red lines mean a lot to you because they're sitting on top of audiences that you actually know very little about. So now if we go and look at the audience that was exposed to a particular ad campaign, we can start asking some questions about the audience. For example, how engaged was the audience that my ad played in front of? This is just a simple screenshot, actually, from our website, where we publish continuously engagement data. So this shows, maybe not surprisingly, if you know US television habits, that Glee, and in this case, college basketball and Dancing with the Stars are some of the most talked about shows on this particular day, where I pulled a sample. But as an advertiser, you may actually want a very different slice of the TV genome, where we rank order shows based on who's watching. So this is an alternate view of that same data. And here we are looking at what shows on TV parents talk most about. And you get a completely different list of hundreds of shows rank ordered for parents. A lot of children's programming, in fact, mixed with some adult programming. Reslice the data. How about hardcore gamers? Completely different viewing habits, as you might expect. What about people who are engaged with a Diet Coke brand and talk about it on Twitter, who talk about it in public Facebook posts? My favorite, number 2, super size versus super skinny. Completely different, again, view. So we're taking brands or lifestyles and able to index all of television from specific points of view. So if you're Diet Pepsi or Diet Coke, this is a pretty interesting view of television. Second, I'll show you 2 more examples of kind of the commercial aspects of this. Here is a 3-dimensional analysis of the audience mindset as people talk about a drama on television called Criminal Minds. And what you can see is, in general, the second screen conversation is pretty polite, pretty calm, pretty serious, measurably so when you do semantic analysis of the conversation. If you look at the second screen chatter around Wipeout, the conversation index is far more vulgar. Okay? So why would you care about this? Again, as an advertiser, the overall perception of a piece of programming is now being mixed in with what your friends are saying as you're watching. And if I'm an advertiser and I am interested in baby products versus some edgy young men's product, this is a new kind of index, a new kind of data-driven view of audiences that actually lets me make decisions about where to place my $70 billion of advertising. Third example, and last, is a way of thinking about the DNA of an audience. So this is a genre wheel of programs on television. And now we can probe this wheel. I'll take one of my personal favorite shows, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and probe the TV genome. And what we reveal is a link structure that tells us that the audience that watches and talks about The Daily Show also watches and talks about Glenn Beck and Politics Nation and Face the Nation. And what we're getting is a targeted set of shows, a rank-ordered set of shows. The Colbert Report, naturally, which was a spin-off from The Daily Show. What we're getting is hundreds of shows rank-ordered by overlap of engaged audience. So why would you care about this? If you are the producer of The Daily Show and you want to run promotions of this show and generate word of mouth online using TV advertising, we know of no better data set to decide where to run ads than what you're looking at. Similarly, if you want to reach audiences like the Daily Show audience that are social media active, here you go. So just in one slide, the business model. This is all data that's now available to many clients of Bluefin. It's a subscription-based model that lets clients, both on the advertising and the TV network side, access this data as a real-time stream. and the data is also being integrated. We're working with some partners into ad networks. I'm in Europe, so I know many people are wondering by now for sure, what about privacy? So I'll just make 3 key points. We only analyze intentionally public expressions, so we're not looking at cookies or indirect data. These are people speaking out on public forums such as Twitter, expecting to be heard or wanting to be heard. Second, we only aggregate audiences. We don't target individuals, so we're looking for audience patterns because that's what advertisers are interested in on TV, the reach of large audiences. And likewise, all the DNA analysis of who an audience is, gender, and so forth, is done at this aggregate audience level. So let me show one last thing, sort of pull away from advertising and, in fact, the US context to make a more general point, which is what we're seeing, and I think Bluefin's just a tiny piece of a sea change in what's happening in media, applies across the board. So if we go back to Egypt in the days leading up to the overthrow of Mubarak, and we look at the contrast between the voices on the street, the voices in social media, versus mass media, here you have a rank-ordered set of terms for the first 3 days. This is January 24th through 26th, based on public Facebook posts and Twitter posts. And you can get a sense of what's happening as violence erupts, the call for medics and volunteers and supplies. Meanwhile, same 3-day period, and we've partnered with Al Jazeera. They've given us their full broadcast from this period of time. We've analyzed and indexed what was said on Al Jazeera English network broadcast. Look at the difference. This is the mass media voice. Talking about expressions from whom? From criminals, from terrorists, and now we'll, in 30 seconds, sweep through 2.5 weeks, and if you just watch the tag clouds, social media, or what you might think of as micromedia, the voice of many individuals, and the relationship to how things are being reported officially on Al Jazeera. So a fascinating evolution of the viewpoints on both sides. And we're now February 1st through 3rd, and you're starting to see a shift. No more talk about terrorists and criminals, more and more talk about democracy and humans expressing wants. And by the time we come to the end of this analysis, in Facebook and Twitter, there are shout-outs of congratulations and the official stance of democracy prevailing from Al Jazeera. Imagine if Al Jazeera had an automated way of detecting, sort of doing information arbitrage between what they and others were saying on television versus what was being said in mass media and how news could change. So just in closing, back to the TV genome, what we're really doing here is with new data, revealing new kinds of social structures. Whether it's a single tweet that we trace from a TV show that spreads to a small number of connected friends, and to our surprise, we discover they all also tweet about that same show. We discover a group of friends who are physically apart but watching TV together. A new way of viewing television and synchronizing using, in this case, Twitter. Or we go and we find a special individual who is highly connected both to other people and to television. This is an amateur media critic that is a huge influencer in spanning from television to the social web. And finally, it's not sometimes the person that is influencer, but in this case, the person because they're on television. Here's President Obama, beginning of this year, giving the State of the Union address. And this is all real data we're looking at. And at scale, we watch literally a nation burst into conversation in real time. Imagine in the future where that president can hear his or her country react in real time, and that country demands that he respond and have effectively a conversation at scale. I think that's where things are heading. If you're interested in this, you can follow me on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deb. That was incredible. Thank you so much.